The street was busy with traffic when the little girl ran straight into him. She was shaking, barefoot, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She grabbed the sleeve of the last man anyone in that block would ever dare to touch. "Please, please help me," she sobbed. "They took my brother." The Mafia boss froze. His men reacted instantly, hands moving, eyes scanning, engines idling, but he raised one finger and the entire street went silent. Children didn't approach him. People didn't beg him, and no one ever said those words to him. The girl pointed down the alley with trembling hands. "They said if I told anyone, he wouldn't come back." That's when he noticed it. The red marks on her wrist. Fresh. Rope burns. He knelt down slowly, his voice calm but deadly quiet. "How old is your brother?" he asked. "6," she whispered. The Mafia boss stood up, and in that moment, everyone around him understood one thing: whoever took that boy had just signed their own death sentence. Stay with me until the end, because what the Mafia boss did next didn't just save a child, it left an entire city frozen in silence. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Vincent Romano had controlled the streets of Little Italy for 12 years. His word was law. His silence meant death. And his reputation? It preceded him like a shadow that stretched across every corner, every business, every life in a 6-block radius. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. A 7-year-old girl with tears streaming down her dirt-stained face, standing in front of him like he was just another man on the street, like he was someone who could help instead of someone to fear. The thing about power is that it creates distance, real power, the kind that Vincent wielded. It builds walls so thick that regular people become ghosts moving through your world. You see them, but you don't really see them. They exist, but they don't really matter. Except this little girl had shattered that distance in 3 seconds flat. Vincent's driver, Tony, stepped forward. His hand was already reaching inside his jacket. The protocol was simple. Nobody touches the boss. Nobody approaches the boss without permission. And nobody, absolutely nobody, grabs Vincent Romano's sleeve and lives to tell about it. But Vincent's raised finger stopped everything cold. Not just Tony. Not just the other men in suits who had materialized from doorways and parked cars. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. "What's your name?" Vincent asked, his voice softer than anyone had heard it in years. "Sophia," she whispered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Sophia Martinez." Martinez. Vincent knew that name. Carlos Martinez ran the small grocery store on Mulberry Street. Honest man. Paid his debts. Never caused trouble. Never asked for favors. The kind of neighbor who minded his own business and expected others to do the same. "Where are your parents, Sophia?" "Mama's at work. Papa's at the store. They don't know yet." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I was supposed to watch Tommy after school. We were playing in the park, and these men came and they grabbed him and put him in a van, and I tried to stop them, but they pushed me down, and one of them said, if I told the police, Tommy would disappear forever." Vincent's jaw tightened. He looked down at her wrists again. Rope burns. Fresh ones. These weren't the marks of someone who'd been restrained briefly. These were the marks of someone who'd fought. Hard. What did the men look like? Sophia closed her eyes, concentrating. 3 of them. The big one had a scar here. She traced a line from her left ear to her chin. The skinny one had gold teeth, and the one in charge, he had a tattoo on his neck, like a snake. Vincent's blood went cold. Not because he didn't recognize the description, because he did. The Serpenti, a crew that had been pushing into his territory for months. Small-time dealers, mostly. Selling drugs near schools, extorting local businesses, thinking they could carve out a piece of Vincent's neighborhood without consequences. But this, taking a child, this was different. This was a declaration of war wrapped in the most unforgivable crime imaginable. Vincent had rules. Everyone in his world had rules. You didn't hurt women, you didn't hurt children, and you sure as hell didn't kidnap 6-year-old boys to send messages. "Sophia," Vincent said, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that? She nodded, still sniffling. I'm going to find your brother. I'm going to bring him home safe, and the men who took him are never going to hurt anyone ever again. Do you understand? But you don't even know me. Why would you help? It was such an innocent question, such a pure question. The kind of question that cut through years of cynicism and calculation and reminded Vincent of something he'd almost forgotten, that some things mattered more than territory disputes and respect and fear. Some things were just right or wrong. Because, Vincent said, standing up and straightening his coat, nobody takes children in my neighborhood. He turned to Tony. Get Carlos Martinez on the phone. Tell him what happened. Tell him his daughter is safe and his son will be home before midnight. Boss, Tony said quietly, if this is the Serpenti, they're probably expecting us to come. Could be a trap. Vincent smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Tony, they just made the biggest mistake of their miserable lives. They think taking a child will make us back down. They think threatening a 6-year-old boy will teach us respect. He looked down at Sophia, who was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. They're about to learn why nobody challenges Vincent Romano on his own streets. Vincent pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Marco, it's me. Cancel everything for tonight. I need the crew assembled in 1 hour. Full team. This isn't business. This is personal. He hung up and looked at his watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. Rush hour was starting. Traffic would be heavy. Police patrols would be minimal. Perfect timing for what needed to happen next. Sophia, I'm going to have Tony take you to your papa's store. You're going to stay there until I come back with Tommy. Can you be brave for just a little longer? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Good girl. As Tony gently guided Sophia toward the car, Vincent's mind was already working. The Serpenti operated out of an abandoned warehouse on the east side. 3 exits, 2 lookouts, usually 4 to 6 men inside during the day. But this wasn't going to be a typical raid. This wasn't about sending messages or establishing dominance. This was about a little boy who should be playing in the park instead of tied up in some rat-infested building, probably scared out of his mind. Vincent Romano had built his reputation on being methodical, patient, calculating. He didn't act in anger because anger made you sloppy. Anger got people killed. But as he watched Tony's car disappear around the corner with Sophia in the back seat, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Pure, cold fury. The Serpenti wanted to play games with children? Fine. Vincent would show them exactly what happened when you brought innocent kids into a grown man's war. By 6 o'clock, word had spread through Little Italy like wildfire. Not through phone calls or text messages, but through the ancient network that connected every grandmother, every shopkeeper, every street corner regular in the neighborhood. Vincent Romano was moving. And when Vincent Romano moved, the entire city held its breath. The crew assembled at Salvatore's restaurant looked nothing like what Hollywood movies would have you believe. These weren't flashy men in expensive suits twirling gold chains. These were fathers, uncles, brothers, men who'd grown up on these same streets, who knew every alley, every fire escape, every back door in a 10-block radius. Marco Benedetti, Vincent's right hand for 15 years, spread a hand-drawn map across the table. Warehouse is here, he said, pointing to a red X. 2-story building. Main entrance faces the street. Loading dock in the back. Fire escape on the north side. Security? Vincent asked, studying the layout. 2 lookouts. 1 on the roof, 1 by the front entrance. Inside, we're looking at maybe 6 guys. Could be more. Vincent nodded slowly. In the old days, this would have been simple. Roll up with 15 men, guns blazing, send a message that would echo through the underworld for months. But this wasn't about sending messages anymore. This was about getting a 6-year-old boy home safely. What about the kid? Asked Polly, the youngest member of the crew. Where would they keep him? Basement, most likely, Marco replied. It's soundproof, isolated. They'd want him somewhere he couldn't be heard if he started screaming. The room went quiet. Every man around that table had children, nephews, grandsons. The thought of Tommy Martinez alone and terrified in some basement sent a chill through the air that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. Vincent's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We have the boy. Pier 47, midnight. Come alone or he dies." Vincent showed the message to Marco, who shook his head immediately. "It's a setup, boss. They want you isolated, vulnerable." "Of course it's a setup," Vincent said calmly. "The question is, what kind of setup?" He studied the message again. Pier 47 was in Serpenti territory, completely exposed. No cover, no backup positions. If Vincent showed up alone, he'd be walking into a killing field, which meant the Serpenti had seriously underestimated him. "They think I'm going to play by their rules," Vincent said, sliding the phone into his pocket. "They think fear is going to make me stupid." "So what's the play?" Marco asked. Vincent looked around the table at faces he'd trusted with his life for over a decade. Men who'd stood by him through wars with rival families, FBI investigations, and the constant pressure of keeping order in a world where chaos was always one bad decision away. "We're going to give them exactly what they expect," Vincent said, "and then we're going to show them why that was the worst mistake they ever made." Meanwhile, across town in the abandoned warehouse, Tommy Martinez sat in the corner of a damp basement, trying not to cry. The rope around his wrists was too tight, and his shoulder hurt from where one of the men had grabbed him. He kept thinking about what Sophia had told him that morning about stranger danger, about screaming if anyone tried to take him. But when the van had pulled up, and the big man with the scar had stepped out, Tommy had frozen. Now he was here, wherever here was, listening to voices upstairs, arguing in a language he didn't understand. Every few minutes, footsteps would come down the wooden stairs, and one of the men would check on him. The skinny one with gold teeth seemed nervous. He kept pacing and checking his watch. "This is crazy, Sal," he said to the man with the snake tattoo. "You know who we're messing with, right? Vincent Romano doesn't negotiate, he eliminates." "That's exactly why this will work," Sal replied, lighting another cigarette. "Romano's got a reputation to protect. He can't let word get out that some kid got hurt on his watch. He'll pay whatever we ask. And if he doesn't?" Sal's smile was cold. "Then Little Italy learns that Vincent Romano couldn't protect one 6-year-old boy. His reputation crumbles. The other families move in, and we take over his territory piece by piece." Tommy didn't understand most of what they were saying, but he understood enough to know these men were bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that his mama had warned him about when she told him never to walk alone after dark. He closed his eyes and tried to picture his family. Papa behind the counter at the store, always smiling, always ready with a piece of candy for the neighborhood kids. Mama coming home from her job at the hospital, tired but happy to see him and Sophia. Sophia, who was probably scared and crying right now, wondering if she'd ever see her little brother again. A tear rolled down Tommy's cheek, but he wiped it away quickly. Sophia had taught him to be brave. She'd told him that being scared was okay, but giving up wasn't. So Tommy Martinez, 6 years old and tied up in a basement by men who saw him as nothing more than a pawn in their game, made a decision that would have made his big sister proud. He wasn't going to give up. Back at Salvatore's, Vincent was putting the final pieces of his plan into motion. The beauty of it was its simplicity. The Serpenti expected him to show up at Pier 47 either alone and vulnerable, or with a small crew that they could easily outgun. They weren't expecting him to rewrite the entire game. "Tony, I need you to make some calls," Vincent said. "Every crew we've ever done business with, every family that owes us favors, every independent operator who's ever asked for our protection. I want them all to know what happened today." "What's the message?" "Simple. The Serpenti crossed a line. They took a child. And Vincent Romano is going to show the entire city what happens when you bring innocent kids into our world." Vincent's phone rang. "Carlos Martinez. Mr. Romano, please, have you found anything?" My wife, she's crying. She can't stop crying. Sophia won't leave the store. She keeps asking when Tommy's coming home. Vincent's voice was steady, reassuring. Carlos, listen to me. Your son is coming home tonight. I give you my word. But the police, they said, forget the police. This isn't their world. This is mine. And in my world, children are protected. Always. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Carlos spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Mr. Romano. Whatever you need, whatever it costs nothing, Carlos. This is what neighbors do for each other. After hanging up, Vincent looked at his watch. 9:30, 2.5 hours until the midnight deadline. Time enough to set everything in motion. Time enough to remind the Serpenti why Vincent Romano had controlled these streets for 12 years, and why he'd control them for 12 more. The clock on the wall of Salvatore's restaurant ticked past 10 o'clock when Vincent's phone lit up with incoming calls. Not just one or two, dozens. The network he'd spent 12 years building was responding like a machine that had been waiting for this exact moment. Boss, Marco said, hanging up his own phone. The Torino family is sending 8 men. The Castellanos are mobilizing their entire crew. Even the independents are calling in. Word is spreading that someone took a kid in your territory. Vincent nodded but said nothing. He was watching the street through the restaurant's front window, counting the cars that had appeared in the last hour. Black sedans, dark SUVs, motorcycles with engines that purred like predators. Every arrival meant the same thing. The old code was still alive. The unwritten law that had governed these streets for generations was being honored. You don't touch children. Ever. How many we looking at? Vincent asked. Conservative estimate, 60 men. Could be more by midnight. 60 men. Against maybe a dozen Serpenti who thought they were playing chess, while Vincent was about to unleash an army. But this wasn't about overwhelming force. This was about sending a message that would echo through every criminal organization on the East Coast for the next decade. Touch a child in Vincent Romano's neighborhood, and the entire underworld would hunt you down like rabid dogs. Vincent's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. This time there was a photo attached. Tommy Martinez, sitting in what looked like a basement, hands tied behind his back, but his eyes were defiant. Still fighting, still refusing to break. The message below read, change of plans, bring 2 million cash, Pier 47, 1 hour early, come alone or the boy dies slow. Vincent stared at the photo for a long moment. Something wasn't right. The lighting was wrong, the angle was off. This photo wasn't taken in some random warehouse basement. The concrete walls, the exposed pipes, the specific pattern of water stains on the floor. He knew exactly where this was. Marco, Vincent said quietly. They're not at the warehouse. What do you mean? This photo. It was taken in the old subway tunnels under the meatpacking district. Section C, near the abandoned platform. Marco leaned in to look at the phone. How can you tell? Because I've been in that exact room. 3 years ago, during the Torino situation. We used those tunnels to move merchandise when the feds were watching the docks. Vincent stood up, his mind racing. The Serpenti weren't as smart as they thought they were, but they weren't complete idiots either. Moving the kid to the tunnels was actually clever. Multiple escape routes, easy to disappear underground. Hard for police to track if things went sideways. But they'd made one critical error. They'd chosen a location that Vincent knew better than his own apartment. Change of plans? Vincent announced to the room. Marco, I need you to take half the crew to Pier 47. Make it look like we're preparing for the original meeting. Tony, you take the other half and position them around the meatpacking district. Surface level only. I don't want anyone underground until I give the signal. What about you, boss? Paulie asked. Vincent checked his watch. 11:15. 45 minutes until the new deadline. Time enough to do this right. Time enough to save Tommy and destroy the Serpenti in a way they'd never see coming. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, Vincent said. 1 man? No backup? No weapons? Just me and $2 million in cash? The room erupted in protests. Marco was the loudest. "Boss, that's suicide. You walk into those tunnels alone, you're not walking out." "Yes, I am," Vincent said calmly, "because they're going to be too busy dealing with something they never saw coming to worry about killing me." Vincent pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 5 years. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. "Detective Morrison. This better be important." "Jack, it's Vincent. I need a favor." Silence on the other end. Jack Morrison was one of the few honest cops in the city, which made him both valuable and dangerous. He and Vincent had an understanding. Vincent kept the real violence off the streets, and Jack looked the other way when certain problems solved themselves. "What kind of favor, Vincent?" "The kind that saves a 6-year-old boy and gives you the biggest arrest of your career." Another pause. "I'm listening." "The Serpenti crew kidnapped Tommy Martinez this afternoon. They're holding him in the old subway tunnels under the meatpacking district. I'm going to get the kid back, but I need you to be ready to move when I give you the signal." "Vincent, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm not planning anything violent, Jack. I'm planning something better. I'm planning justice." Vincent hung up before Morrison could argue. He looked around the room at faces that had followed him through hell and back. Men who would die for him without question. Men who trusted him to make the hard decisions when nobody else could. "Listen to me," Vincent said. "In 30 minutes, I'm walking into those tunnels. The Serpenti think they're going to kill me and keep the kid. They think this is their moment to take over our territory." He moved to the window, looking out at the street where more cars continued to arrive. The entire neighborhood was mobilizing. Not just his crew. Not just the families who owed him favors. Regular people. Store owners, cab drivers, kids who'd grown up on these blocks and understood that what happened to Tommy Martinez could happen to any of them. "They picked the wrong neighborhood," Vincent continued. "They picked the wrong family, and they sure as hell picked the wrong man to threaten." Vincent's phone rang. Carlos Martinez again. "Mr. Romano, the police, they came to the store. They said you called them. They said you have a plan." "I do, Carlos. Your son is coming home tonight. But if something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. I've been playing this game a lot longer than the men who took Tommy. Trust me." Vincent hung up and turned back to his crew. "Marco, give me your gun." Marco hesitated. "Boss, you just said—" "I said I was going in without weapons. I didn't say anything about what happens after I get the kid out." Vincent took the pistol and tucked it into his waistband. Then he picked up the briefcase full of cash that Tony had prepared. $2 million. More money than the Serpenti had ever seen in one place. More than enough to make them stupid and greedy. Perfect bait for the trap he was about to spring. "Gentlemen," Vincent said, straightening his tie, "tonight, we remind this city why some lines should never be crossed. Tommy Martinez goes home to his family. The Serpenti disappear forever. And every criminal in a 100-mile radius learns what happens when you bring children into our world." Vincent walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "And when this is over, when the boy is safe and the threat is eliminated, we're going to have a conversation with every crew, every family, every independent operator in the city. We're going to make it crystal clear that children are off limits. Always. No exceptions. No negotiations." He opened the door, letting the cool night air rush into the restaurant. Outside, the street was lined with cars. Dozens of them. The army he'd assembled without firing a single shot or making a single threat, just by being the kind of man who protected children when nobody else would. "See you all in a couple hours," Vincent said. "And remember, when Detective Morrison calls, you don't know anything about any of this. As far as the police are concerned, Vincent Romano was never here tonight." Vincent Romano walked out into the night, carrying $2 million in cash and a plan that would either save Tommy Martinez or get them both killed. Behind him, 60 men prepared to follow him into hell if necessary. Because that's what you did when someone took a child in your neighborhood. You reminded the world that some things were more important than money, territory, or respect. Some things were worth dying for, and some people were worth killing for. The abandoned subway platform beneath the meatpacking district hadn't seen a train in 20 years. Water dripped from rusted pipes. Rats scurried through shadows that seemed to move on their own. The smell of decay and forgotten dreams hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Tommy Martinez sat in the corner where the photo had been taken, trying to stay brave like Sophia had taught him. His wrists hurt, and he was hungry, but he wasn't crying anymore. Crying wouldn't bring help. Crying wouldn't get him home. The man with the snake tattoo kept checking his watch and muttering in a language Tommy didn't understand. The other men seemed nervous. They kept looking at the tunnel entrances like they expected monsters to emerge from the darkness. Maybe they did. Because somewhere above them, Vincent Romano was about to descend into their world. And when Vincent Romano came for you, monsters were exactly what you got. At exactly 11:45, Vincent Romano walked down the rusted metal stairs into the abandoned subway tunnel, the briefcase in his left hand, his right hand free and relaxed. Each footstep echoed off the concrete walls like a countdown timer. Behind him, the entrance to the surface world disappeared into darkness. The Serpenti were waiting exactly where he knew they'd be. Sal, with his snake tattoo, stood in the center of the platform, flanked by 5 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Their weapons were visible, but not drawn, confident, stupid. "Vincent Romano," Sal called out, his voice bouncing off the tunnel walls. "The King of Little Italy comes to bow before his new masters." Vincent said nothing. He walked slowly toward the group, his eyes scanning the shadows, counting exits, measuring distances, 20 feet to the nearest cover. 3 ways out of the platform. 2 men positioned to block escape routes. Amateur hour. "Where's the boy?" Vincent asked, his voice calm as still water. "Safe, for now." Sal gestured toward a doorway that led deeper into the tunnel system. "The money first." Vincent set the briefcase down and opened it. Stacks of $100 bills, neatly arranged, caught the dim light from the emergency lamps that still functioned down here. $2 million. More money than these street thugs had ever imagined. He could see the greed in their eyes, the way they leaned forward slightly, the way their grips on their weapons loosened just a fraction. Money made people stupid. It made them forget that some things were more dangerous than bullets. "Satisfied?" Vincent asked. Sal nodded to one of his men, who disappeared through the doorway. 30 seconds later, he returned with Tommy Martinez. The boy was scared, but unharmed. When he saw Vincent, his eyes widened with recognition. Not because he knew Vincent personally, but because every kid in Little Italy knew that face. The man who kept the neighborhood safe. "Uncle Vincent?" Tommy whispered, using the respectful term Sophia had taught him for the neighborhood elders. Vincent's jaw tightened at the sound of that small, frightened voice, but his expression remained neutral. "It's okay, Tommy. You're going home now." "Not so fast," Sal said, stepping between Vincent and the boy. "The money stays. You stay. The kid leaves. That's the deal." Vincent looked at Sal for a long moment. Then he did something that made every Serpenti in that tunnel nervous. He smiled. "You know what your problem is, Sal?" Vincent said conversationally. "You think like a street thug. Small time, small brain, small vision. What's that supposed to mean? It means you kidnapped the wrong child in the wrong neighborhood from the wrong family." Vincent's voice never rose above a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire tunnel. "It means you declared war on Vincent Romano without understanding what that actually means." Vincent pulled out his phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. He pressed a single button. Speed dial. "Marco," he said into the phone. "Send them in." The sound started as a distant rumble, like thunder rolling across the city above. But it wasn't thunder. It was footsteps, dozens of them, coming from every tunnel entrance, every maintenance access, every forgotten pathway that connected this underground maze to the surface. Vincent had been planning this moment from the second he'd recognized the location in that photo. While the Serpenti thought they were setting a trap, Vincent had been setting a better one. "You see, Sal," Vincent continued, still holding the phone. You made 3 mistakes tonight. First, you took a child. Second, you took him from my neighborhood. And third, you brought him to a place where I have home field advantage. The footsteps were getting louder now. Closer. The Serpenti were looking around nervously, their weapons now drawn but pointing in every direction, because they couldn't tell where the threat was coming from. That's impossible, one of Sal's men stammered. We've been watching the tunnels. Nobody came down here. You've been watching 3 entrances, Vincent said. There are 17 ways into this section of the tunnel system. I know because I've used all of them. The first figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the platform. Then another. Then 10 more. Men Vincent had called. Men who'd answered without question because they understood what was at stake. But these weren't just Vincent's crew. These were fathers from the neighborhood. Store owners, cab drivers. Men who'd grown up on the same streets as Tommy Martinez and understood that what happened to him could happen to any child in Little Italy. Jesus Christ, Sal breathed, spinning around as more figures appeared from different tunnel entrances. How many of them are there? Enough, Vincent said simply. The beauty of Vincent's plan wasn't the overwhelming numbers. It was the psychology. The Serpenti had expected a negotiation, maybe a shootout. They'd prepared for violence and greed and the kind of criminal behavior they understood. They weren't prepared for justice. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent said, his voice carrying to every corner of the platform. Tommy is going to walk over here and stand behind me. The briefcase is going back upstairs with us, and you gentlemen are going to have a conversation with Detective Morrison, who should be arriving any minute now. As if summoned by Vincent's words, the sound of police radios crackled through the tunnels. Multiple units. SWAT teams. The kind of response that only happened when someone with Vincent's connections made the right phone calls. Tommy Martinez ran straight into Vincent's arms, and for the first time in 12 hours, the 6-year-old boy was safe. The Serpenti surrendered without firing a shot. Detective Morrison's team arrested them all. And by dawn, word had spread through every criminal organization from Boston to Miami that Vincent Romano had mobilized an entire neighborhood to save one child. The message was crystal clear. Touch a kid in Little Italy, and you don't just face Vincent Romano. You face every father, every brother, every man who believes children should be protected. The Serpenti crew disappeared into the federal prison system. Their organization crumbled within a week. But the real story wasn't about gangsters or justice or even revenge. It was about a little girl who ran to the one man everyone feared and discovered that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is also the one who'll move heaven and earth to bring a child home safe. Vincent Romano kept his word. Tommy Martinez was home before midnight, and the entire city learned that some lines should never be crossed.